I don't believe taxation's theft. And the reason I don't is because if you can go to Prospera and opt into their fee scheme, then you're no longer, tax cattle or, whatever the term is. And I get it that taxation has evolved from a form of slavery. I get it, like 100%. But if you go back and you ask some slave, are you a slave if you can leave? They'd be like, no, I can't leave.
This episode of the Free Cities podcast is brought to you by Veritas Village. Now, Veritas Village is an off-grid, self-sufficient place for people who are interested in living a normal, freedom-oriented life. You can reduce your reliance on corporations or government systems in your very own energy self-sufficient luxury home with its own water supply, located in a perfect climate to grow your own food. Communities use Bitcoin, and you can also buy your property with Bitcoin as well. www.ecovillages.life/podcast for more info. Please don't forget to mention the Free Cities podcast, and in the meantime, enjoy the conversation. There's been a number of people I've spoken to over the last couple of years since we was doing this pod who've mentioned you as being someone that was pivotal in them actually getting in contact with Free Cities. The whole, in particular, I think Alex Ugorji said, Alex,
yep.
The oldest, well, I say oldest, the longest practically living person in a free city currently.
Yeah,
I think
that is so.
He said he
maybe Eric Bremen might be able to make an argument. He's had a family there and that sort of thing. But yes, they're right there. Yeah. But
he said, Alex said that you told him about Free Cities. Yep. You told him particularly about Próspera and Honduras. So you must have. How did you hear about it so early on in things?
So when it came to Próspera, it goes back to a convention I ended up in, that the name I do not recall. I've been to many, many, many Liberty sorts of conventions. I met Titus Gable, who at the time was working with Eric Bremen of Próspera. And I had paid attention for some time to Honduras because they had this sort of ZA law. And the first thing was an article many years ago on Patry Freeman and his endeavors there. And that kind of ended up, in a ball of flames, as many of these things do. But Eric Bremen and Eric Bremen and Titus, they wanted to, revive this and kind of make a free city there. And I met Titus at this event, did an interview with him. Now remember, I'm running around in a king outfit. I've got a crown on my head. I have,
Why?
Why?
Yeah.
I'm the sovereign.
Of what?
Well, whatever you want. I'm the intergalactic space king.
Okay.
And why is that? Well, because I said I was.
Fair enough.
How is any king a king? Well, they say they are, and other people agree with them. So I took this shtick as a libertarian. It kind of triggers. They go one way or the other. The libertarians are like, my liege, or they're like, screw you, monarch. And it's kind of funny to see. Either way, it's a good reaction, because if they choose me as their king, then, I want nothing from them. I'm taking no taxes. I have no laws or anything like that. If they, in fact, want, dislike rulers, well, fine. I feel the same as you do. You can declare yourself also an intergalactic space king, and
But when you say you were wearing a crown and stuff, were you literally walking around wearing a crown?
Oh yes,
in Honduras was this?
No, this was in Washington D.C.
Okay,
where lots of people claim to rule you. So I was walking around with a crown, not claiming to rule you.
So the time you found out about Free Cities through Patry Freeman, is that right? So for what he was doing?
Yes.
I didn't know he was involved in Prospera. Was he involved?
He wasn't involved in Prospera. He was pre-Prospera.
That was seasteading, though, or was that something?
It was pre-seasteading, as a matter of fact.
So that's interesting.
It was just after seasteading.
So Patry was into the free private city idea before.
Yeah, I think we were calling them free cities back then, maybe, or something like that. Yeah.
But was that the model of the private governance?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay. All right.
And I think that he, what Titus did was to write the book, but Patry had some idea sort of that was, less formed, that he had come up with. And so, I've been watching this all along. I met Titus Gable there at the event. He's proper European in his suit and all these things. And I think he at first was like, I don't know if I want to get interviewed by this guy. I have my, interview equipment and all that stuff.
Did you have your crown on?
Oh, yeah.
Well, there's a lot of monarchists over there. Less so over here, but
I think that a monarchist in America is an entirely different beast. What I think about the king and queen, to me, it's the queen, right? But I get it. She's passed. What I think about the monarchs in England is they are excellent tourist attractions. And I think that that's the reason people go to England. Half of people go just to see that. So I wouldn't get rid of my greatest tourist attraction by any means.
However, I've got to butt in there because there is a rebuttal to that.
Sure.
And that is France, which has the biggest tourist attractions in France.
Paris is the number one visited city.
Or not even that, but the Palace of Versailles.
Yeah.
And what happened to the royal family in you don't need a living royal family. You just need a legacy of a royal family.
It could be true. I don't know the answer, but I find, what is the downside of the monarchs in England? Other, like the current monarchs. I don't mean the past monarchs. Somebody can always draw up something bad that happened in the past, and I certainly can too, but the current monarchs for the last 50 years haven't been a real detraction on the life of any given Englishman.
Well, look, apart from the fact they're deeply annoying, but also, all right, it's not, they don't exactly affect your daily life unless you live in London, because sometimes they close all the roads just so they can get through. It's just the pure hypocrisy and annoyance of them commenting on stuff. And actually, who knows what
we have the Kardashians.
Right. I know, but they don't have the final say on law in the UK.
But
your country,
they don't give the final say on law. They don't. They haven't.
Well, who knows? I don't know about. On paper,
it's possible.
On paper, they can, right?
They can,
right? So I'm pretty sure that's a kind of little hint that they probably are in some shape or form. That's a whole different story. This is a story about who runs the world.
We've got the video. Yeah. You can look at it the way you want.
In my experience, it's almost never the people, in the plain sight, people like the royal family are probably pulling things in the background and pulling levers and behind the curtain and all this kind of stuff. Not that I know. I don't care hugely, but I do care a little bit because I don't like the idea of inheriting respect. Do you know what I mean?
Oh yeah.
Which is I find deeply annoying, and I revere in only respecting people who have generated some respect from me, and they're not a respectful. I've met a lot of the royal family. I was a journalist in, The Independent, which was we hated the royal family, out and out hated the royal family. I've told
just a Republican newspaper.
No, it was a lefty newspaper, actually.
I've certainly read it many times.
Right. Well, we just had a thing about not liking the royal family. It is a kind of left-wing position. It was that, the hoi polloi should be disliked. It's the common man that should be liked. But it was all bullshit. It was all complete bullshit. It depended. But I've met them on a number of occasions. I was a pool photographer sometimes at royal events and things like that. And they've always been very patronizing and very stuck up and not my kind of people at all. Not anyone you want to hang out with,
Oh, I don't want to hang out with them. That much I can give you. I just think that, when I go to England, and you get me, a avowed libertarian, to go there and see the guys with big furry hats and come into the rooms full of, I do love the medieval weapons, I'll give you that. Rooms full of medieval weapons, all over the place, and, go to these different castles and these sorts of things. Having traveled to 50-something countries around the world, I can say many, many, many countries have nothing to see. Like, go see this thing or that, and there's just not much to see. Whereas England has a great deal to see. And much of it centers around monarchs and these sort of things. Well,
oppression tourism. I
don't know where, we can't say where the world would be without, empire. And we just simply don't have any idea. And one thing that I can credit England with is spreading this particular language, which is, if you've tried to learn another one, significantly easier to get the basics of English than it is to get the basics of many other languages. I get it. It's hard to spell straight or,
thought.
Those words. I get it. These aren't easy. Light. Why is light spelled the way that it is? I don't know. But generally speaking English, people can muddle through a little better than they can. I mean, what would it be if it was Latin or its modern equivalent, French? Yeah, I don't want any of those. There's not another language that's in the top 10 that I would pick over English, and England spread that far and wide. It's likely that English will be is the global language now, and by the end of 2100, projections are as high as 75% of people will speak English.
Not one of the Mandarin or Cantonese or...
Sure. So Mandarin is, Cantonese is much smaller than Mandarin. Mandarin is a lot of people, but it's concentrated in one place. And those people are aging. If you look at the sort of demographic trees in China, you'll see that there are far fewer young people than there are older people. When you look at a language and adoption, you want to look at who is a non-native speaker speaking it. And English just pones the rest of the languages when it comes to this.
Well, also going back, I mean, we're slagging the monarchy off, but there's a lot of quite.
I love the monarchy. I for one respect our English rules.
But there are a lot of pretty good, arguments for monarchies. Certainly over democracies, let's say. And a lot of people who sort of live by the democratic system would say that monarchies are undemocratic. But actually, with monarchs, if you get a good one, everything's good.
Yep.
If you get a bad one, everything's bad.
That's
but in the meantime, they think long term. They think much better they work much better than democratic systems because there's not all this jumping around, changing. They can think about a strategy for a long time, and as a result, look at the Middle East. There's families running the United Arab Emirates, each one, and doing pretty well as far as I can see, and they've got no democratic system to speak of, and people love going there. People are flocking there to live a good life, non-native people,
I think that one of the problems with democracy, and again, I'm not advocating for monarchy. I can tell you the advantages and disadvantages to some extent. But one of the distinct disadvantages of democracy is asking fools their opinion. You come down to it. I can't name my representative. I don't know who claims to represent me in Washington, D.C., and I am a former radio talk show host. I guess I am a current one because I was on the air just a couple of nights ago. I should know this information, and the vast majority of people who are going to hear this, they don't know the answer either. And if you don't know that, you're an ignoramus in this particular area. And I don't like to get my information from ignoramuses. Ultimately, the opinion of somebody on a given, who should be elected here and there, it's not very valuable. And the worst part is the most informed person in a given jurisdiction voting is canceled out. Their vote can be canceled out by the least informed person. I tell this story, and it isn't the nicest story, but it is a true story. It happened to me. I met a woman. And once people find out that I, radio talk show host for a living, they love to give their opinion on things. She told me that she worked at a home for developmentally disabled adults. And every time there's an election, she loads them into the van. She drops them off at the polling place. She tells them to vote Democrat and then takes them for ice cream afterwards.
She's buying their vote, isn't she?
I mean, I don't know what they do. Maybe they dislike her and they vote Republican. I have no idea what they do.
They might be. Who knows?
But
that'd be funny.
You know, I mean, these are quite literally developmentally disabled adults. Now, I'm not saying they can't be informed. I'm saying they're probably not. And if you were to take the Albert Einstein of the given jurisdiction and say in that jurisdiction he's counseled out by that van full of developmentally disabled adults. And it's a shame. And this is why I think that there should be some kind of, I think democracy has its problems. It was made for one thing, to keep the hoi polloi from rising up and beheading their rulers. And that's the only reason. It's just essentially better than revolution.
True. So, and I put my hand up and admit that for many years I thought it was the pinnacle of governance, technology, let's call it. So what is then? What's better? Like how do we, obviously, it's not a scam. It's not like a conspiracy, right? Mm-hmm. So it's got relevance and it's, like you say, it's better than a lot of other systems, but what's better than that?
I think that the democracy is essentially trading, what we say here in the United States is trading one ruler 1,000 miles away for 1,000 rulers 1 mile away. And that's the problem is that power coalesces. It comes into a tight little knot. And it ultimately the best thing to do is to destroy power. Power is always going to corrupt. And the best person to determine how your life goes is you. And people want, the second thing they think is, well, I've got my life under control, so I need to control yours. And they know the only way to control your life is through the machinations of government. People, avarice and envy, these things are very much a human thing. And so they see, well, somebody's doing better than me. I'd like to get some of their money. I'm fine with the thief taking a 90% cut if they can give me 10%. And that's essentially what government is like this wasteful organization comes in, takes wealth from those who've created it, good, bad, or indifferent. Not every wealthy person's good, and not every wealthy person is bad. But they are better at spending their money than I am. As much as I may hate the idea, like I'd love them to spend their money the way that I say. But, that's what it comes down to. The best choice is human freedom. I'm not saying we don't need governance. I'm saying that we don't know what sort of governance that we need. And so therefore we should opt towards rights and freedom every opportunity we get.
What about the idea that thousands and thousands of small competing nations that you can opt in and out of? I mean, would you say that's a pinnacle of governance, or is that just another step in a rung in the ladder kind of thing?
Sure. The free private cities model is essentially the idea of a bunch of resorts that you live at where they provide whatever government services people want. I think what this will result in is people with a shared value set coming together. So there'll be the Catholic free private city. There'll be the Quaker free private city. There'll be, whatever the value set is, the anti-abortion, the pro-abortions, probably the dominatrix free private city. Who knows?
Abortion city. What a lovely place.
Well, I know. I don't know where they get their people from, but
I'm sure they'll find a lot of people. But people will go. There'll be a lot of tourists there.
There will be tourists. Yeah.
Yeah, I think you're right.
Ultimately. Yeah. So I think that so long as the only freedom I care about is the freedom to travel. If I can leave the given jurisdiction and go to another jurisdiction, then as far as I'm concerned, that's a free place. You opt into the rules. The same way that if I go to Club Med and they say there's no smoking here, then I shouldn't smoke. Now, fortunately, I don't. But if I did, well, hotels now. It used to be, not too many years ago, you went into a hotel room, you said smoking or non-smoking room. Now the vast majority of them tell you, if you smoke in our room, we will fine you $250 or whatever the number might be in that given place. And that's completely within their rights. So I think that ultimately resort is the best term I can come up with. We have free private cities now. There are resorts on islands in the world that they produce their own water, they produce their own power, they have their own governance. And think about a cruise ship for a minute. It's a free private city. These things exist and have existed for a great deal of time. Now, we have to figure out why somebody would move to a given one. It's like, what does Prospera offer besides freedom? Because libertarians look at freedom in two different ways. We look at freedom as A, the ability to do what you want so long as you don't harm someone else. And B, anything's fine so long as it's voluntary. So, like I said, we were using the example, and I like to use this as an absurd example. It always catches people's attention. The dominatrix city. If you can, if a man can choose to go to the dominatrix city and be walked around on a leash and lashed on his bottom, but he's free to leave, that is a libertarian society, so long as he gets to leave. Now, who am I to say? And that's the funny juxtaposition of freedom. In one hand, that's not a free place at all, because you're opting into servitude. On the other hand, it's free so long as you can leave. And so, yes, I do think that federations of little free private cities is probably the future.
Is that the only way libertarians can live if they want to live, if they don't want to be paradoxical? Do you think?
I think that, there was a book that was fundamental in my formation as a libertarian, and that's called How to Be Free in an Unfree World by Harry Brown.
Yeah, I know. It's a very good book. Very good book.
But it was written in like 1971.
Yeah.
And he did do an update on it. But what I've noticed is that the trap, the hole has gotten smaller and smaller for the freedom that you can create for yourself. And now with AI, we're going to get let me back that statement up. Let me perpetuate that statement first. So Bitcoin was created so that we would have these unmarked bank accounts and be able to make transactions without being tracked and that sort of thing. AI's introduction is going, at this point, we know the relationship between many different Bitcoin accounts and who's going where and what's going on. And this is all based on the fact that AI now exists. So AI is going to, bring the little window of freedom much, much closer. I have my business partner, Ian Freeman, is currently sitting in federal prison for selling Bitcoin without a license. At his trial, the prosecutors literally said that the victims of the crime should have purchased their Bitcoin from a licensed vendor. I mean, how would it have changed the fact that they got scammed by some Nigerian prince? Not at all. But they would have bought their Bitcoin from somebody licensed rather than somebody unlicensed. And that's the whole thing. So, yeah, it's...
I hear what you say about AI being very good at working out who's who on the Bitcoin network. But I have to push back a little bit on that because there are now second layers. There's the Lightning Network, which is
far... The Lightning Network is very tracked.
Yeah, well, it's not... No, I disagree with that.
It's certainly not permissionless.
No, but... Well, it is permissionless in a way. I would say the thing about the Lightning Network is, for example, is it's far more private than the base chain. And it can be completely private. If you and me have a channel between us, no one can, and we're both using our own nodes to route our transactions, unless someone comes along and prizes our node open and looks at the data in there, there's nothing that they can derive from that. They can just see that you and me have a certain amount of liquidity between us that we can, Now, there's lots of people doing that. So it is a much more private network. And now there's another set of tools, Cashew, all these kind of things, which are sort of, So I don't think that the window of Bitcoin privacy is getting smaller. In the opposite, I think it's getting larger because people are working on it specifically because it's getting smaller.
Some of the smartest minds in the planet are working on Bitcoin and cryptocurrency. You won't get an argument from me there. And many of them care a great deal about Bitcoin. The only thing that I'm saying is that Bitcoin, as it existed previously, when I got on the air, we were the first media in the world to discuss Bitcoin. When I got it, and I was paid by Roger Ver many years ago to promote Bitcoin, and words that we used, peer-to-peer, no longer true. Open source, not really effectively true. Anonymous, and then we moved our term to pseudonymous, no longer true. That many of these terminologies are just not the way that it is now. And I'm not saying that it can't be replicated. I'm not saying that the Bitcoin code can't be changed. I'm saying that if you made a transaction in 2015, that AI knows who you are.
Yeah, but you would have known that back then.
I didn't know that.
You must have known that. It's an open network. Anyone can look at anything on there.
I did not know that.
Right.
No. I really thought we literally use terms. 2015 may not be the right thing to say, but we believed that it was anonymous, and then we changed our term to pseudonymous.
Well, that's a shame because you should have thought a little bit harder about it. I mean, it's obvious that that's true.
I didn't know what AI was going to do and how it was going to work in the future.
Well, no, but you could have known that everything you do is visible. So it's not hard to work out.
200 radio stations and the largest freedom podcast in the world. No one ever called in and said, hey, this is what's going to happen, guys. It was quite the opposite. I mean, everybody was wild and crazy about what was going to happen with cryptocurrency.
I don't think that undermines the principle, though. I think because that's I can see that that's true. I've thought about. I remember thinking in the sort of late 90s. I was a photographer, and I remember thinking about the potential of the internet in the future at understanding what photos were and things like that. That we now almost like starting to take for granted that an AI can look at a photo and turn it into words, for example. And back then, no one was thinking about the fact that a photo might be describable in online or categorizable, all this kind of stuff. And as a result, a lot of people did a lot of stupid things with photos back then. You should never put photos on the internet unless you are expecting them to be absolutely freely available to everyone at all time. And that wasn't even a closed network, whereas Bitcoin's an open network. It's obvious that sooner or later, someone's going to work out what that long string of numbers and that string of numbers, and they've been doing this and that. But like I say, Lightning came along. Now there's Cashew, there's Mints, there's people are working on this constantly, and I feel quite confident actually that privacy will exist in an arms race.
Yes.
Obviously.
That's what it is. Yeah. It's an arms race. And all I'm saying is that I don't want to go up against 21st century cops with a crossbow. Yes. And that's kind of what Bitcoin was back then. There was, as a matter of fact, analogies that of the crossbow to Bitcoin and privacy and all these things. They were analogous in many ways. And the world, 10 years from now, cryptocurrency is going to be a different ball game than it is at this moment. And that's all I would say.
I would imagine here, I'll make a prediction then based on what you didn't make a prediction in 2013 or whenever it was. We should have thought.
I made the prediction Bitcoin, if it's worth $1, is worth $1 million.
Yes. That's probably still going to come true.
Maybe.
I think that obviously Bitcoin is like a gun. It's who wields Bitcoin that is important. The gun's not necessarily inherently good, bad, whatever. And I think there'll be nations that decide to implement Bitcoin because they are the kind of nation that appreciate the fact that they want open networks of value transfer. They don't want that. So I think what happens to Bitcoin will be a reflection of what happens to society, like what happens in the physical world. The tool is there for people that want to use it. If you and me now, I still think it's a peer-to-peer network, unlike you. If I could send you some Bitcoin right now, peer-to-peer, and that would be absolutely fine. In the future, it may be more difficult on the base layer. It may be exorbitantly expensive. But that doesn't matter because I could send it to you already on the Lightning Network if you wanted it. You know? But I think...
But I'd have to have a white Lightning wallet, and it would have to, and I'd have, we'd have to open a chain, and that would be the pays.
Not necessarily. We wouldn't have to open a channel. There's custodial Lightning wallets if you want. I mean, the point is, the genie's out the bottle, and also the ideological genie's out the bottle with Bitcoin. I think what Bitcoin, at least what it taught me, was that money free of the state or free of a central control body is really important. You know, we had cash and we had, things that we passed between each other, and we just took them for granted. And now they're disappearing. We need something which is like cash. We need to be able to do anonymous transactions between us, because you and I both come from that world, and we know how not even how important it is, but how it's none of your business why I'm giving you $5 for a coffee, or why I'm whatever. It's none of your business.
Or what's in the coffee.
Exactly. It's literally none of your business, and that's just normal. We'd have to make this into something like weird or unusual. It's just none of your business what I'm doing privately. And if we don't have a tool to do that, we've got a bit of a problem. And unfortunately, the digital world has thrown up all these new problems. And one of them is it's very easy to track everything that's happening in the digital world. Good example being, I've just picked up a hire car. And I kid you not, it's like getting into an aircraft now. I turned it on, the whole of the front dashboard lit up, and the first thing it said was, downloading Google services, blah, blah, and I'm just like, Jesus, this is the future of, this is the future of cars. You imagine the future of buildings, the future of roads, the future of planes, the future, it's going to be very difficult to not be a part of the matrix. So we need a few tools at our disposal. And, it might be hard to avoid the physical matrix unless you come to a lovely place like New Hampshire and live in the woods and live a good life. But if you're in the middle of a city, living, it's going to be super oppressive in the wrong country.
What do they say? 10 million cameras in London now?
At least, probably.
And they're just always watching. And I think that that's good and bad. It's the privacy aspect. It's bad. But on the other hand, I don't think you can commit a crime anymore, like a violent crime anymore, without being seen.
But who cares if you commit the crime? That's the thing. Mm-hmm. Plenty of crimes are getting committed. I mean, crimes changed, obviously. Yep. People don't smash into your car anymore and nick your stereo, for example.
It just doesn't happen,
No, but they do drive by and steal your phone out of your hand. And most of those little petty crimes are unenforceable, really.
Petty crimes not what I'm worried about. I'm talking about the murders. Like generally, if you run in, however the murder might occur.
How do you murder? You just run in.
I don't know. Well,
with a knife above, knife in one hand, gun in the other, blazing. Yeah,
I have. I'm 100% against murder. Just gotta say.
Okay. Manslaughter's okay, but murder not. Well, look, we're laughing, but you are alluding to one of the things. I wouldn't, I revolve around libertarians, and I spend a lot of time with libertarians. I find it hard to class myself as a libertarian because I don't really know what it means. Okay. And one of the reasons is because of what you've just described there. Libertarianism is, I always think of it as about living free. Mm-hmm. But then you've described London as a place that's highly oppressive, yet the right to do that, to put up all those cameras, is absolutely fine. Yep. If you see what I mean. So sure. I find a bit of a paradox. I find it very hard to label myself as anything, really. Right. Apart from, I suppose, if anything, just leave me alone.
Right.
I'm that guy, But that's even a paradox.
Yep.
You can't leave me alone when I'm standing next to you on the train.
Right.
And, I'm there. It's like you might want to walk into me by mistake or something. I don't know.
Yeah, the leave me alone guys, when they leave their property, they enter another world, and it's somebody else's. And this is one of the things that kind of separates me from other libertarians. I don't believe taxation's theft. Ooh. And the reason I don't is because if you can go to Prospera and opt into their fee scheme, then you're no longer, tax cattle or, whatever the term is. And I get it that the taxation is evolved from a form of slavery. I get it, like 100%. But if you go back and you ask some slave, are you a slave if you can leave? They'd be like, no, I can't leave. And it's that ability to travel, that ability to cross a jurisdictional line. And that's why I support free cities, is because they advocate for more jurisdictional lines and more jurisdictional autonomy. And I think that that's really what's going to change things. We are never going to be free in the sense that we want to be free, because that utopia can't stand.
I suppose I agree with what you're describing there, but it works as well, much better, when you have a real decentralized group of these things. And that's one of the problems we have at the moment. You know, there are less and less states are garnering more and more land and space. And sure, you know, in a way, I could opt out the UK. I could go and opt into France if I want.
Yep.
I could even get a French passport, etc. But it's, I mean, yeah, what is the difference there? What's the difference between the free city model and the fact that I could renounce my English passport and come and live in America? You know.
Yeah, I'd be happy to jump into it. I do it regularly. These evolutions of the slave model, and that's what I'm, you know, the difference between master and servant, king and serf, ruler and citizen, like these are just degrees. The model of free cities is effectively, as I said, taking resorts and allowing people to live there, making a resort where somebody wants to live. It's a small geographic area. And if you think about it, you don't go that far generally. I mean, you're hopping in your car and you're driving to work, but in many cases, that's because work is farther than your house is. And so if you could make work close, then you don't need to go so far. How many miles do you walk in a day? And if a place is delightful to be at, then really do you want to leave? So that's, I think, the next step. Now, the biggest hurdle, in my opinion, for free cities is making a reason that people would want to move. We think, as libertarians, that people will move for freedom. And the Free State Project, where we sit right now in lovely New Hampshire, has, I believe that New Hampshire was chosen in 2004, and we are therefore 20 years into New Hampshire as the Free State Project, and how many movers do we actually have? I don't know the answer, because it's difficult. Once somebody is moved, they're counted, but when they leave, they're not. So do we have 5,000 people who moved for more freedom? Did we convert 5,000 more free staters within the state? I don't know. Depends on how you define freedom. Free staters, it depends on how you define a mover and any of these things that come into play. So even in this circumstance, we've had some successes in New Hampshire, but we aren't free. In fact, I think that New Hampshire will be as free as a state can be, the United States of the United States. And that will be essentially the pinnacle of the project.
You were saying then that it's about attracting people to come. Yeah. Why do people want to come? Funnily enough, and I've gone through a bit of an evolution of thought on this one. I used to think that this was very much a kind of Western-centric idea, like digital nomads, like thinking the Prospera model here. You've got to get people, you've got to attract capital, you've got to attract businesses. But I think actually the truth of the matter is that the successful free cities that actually end up getting built are going to be cities like in Nigeria or which basically offer every single or 90% of people a better standard of living. So they just go and live there.
Yeah.
It's not that they're going to need to attract, kind of a certain type of tech entrepreneur or anything like this. It's just going to attract everyone because where they live at currently is a lower standard of living for a higher cost. And that there will be work, there will be jobs, there will be an economy, and there will be a good standard of living in this place. And that's why they'll go there. And I think, I don't know a few people that agree with that idea. I think.
I would say that is the only idea that would probably work.
Well, Prospera is not that.
No, it's not. I advocate for Prospera because we have probably a largely Western audience, And Prospera makes sense for that type of audience. It's great. However, there's another ZA in Honduras, and that ZA is called Morazan City, or if you want the website, it's morazan.city.
Ciudad Morazan, I think.
Yeah, Ciudad Morazan in Spanish.
I think that's the web address, isn't it? Ciudad Morazan. Anyway,
they may have another web address, but if you go to morazan.city, you will certainly find a website that focuses on Morazan. So this, what they did was they went to one of the most awful places in Honduras, Choloma. I mean, literally, they joke about Choloma in Honduras the way that Americans joke about Cicero or the South Side of Chicago or Detroit or, any awful place in the U.S. Liberty City used to be one of these places that they would make fun of. And I don't know where they are in England, but, there are bad neighborhoods and they joke about them. And so they went to this place. They bought 100 acres. I don't know how many hectares that is. And they built some housing units. These housing units are currently renting for $140 a month. People who are living in corrugated metal shacks and paying the same amount for nothing, are now going in, and they have a safe place that's surrounded by a wall with police. They are a community is starting. They have little parties every weekend. Every weekend there's a fiesta. I go out there, and hang out. There's kids running around. I couldn't tell you how many children have been born, not within the city, but to families who live in the city. And it is just delightful. And to me, the one thing that Morazan proves is that you don't need libertarians to make liberty. Massimo Mazzone, the guy who created Morazan, I don't know whether this was his intention or his thought. I know that he's very big into entrepreneurial communities. But what he discovered was that you don't need libertarians to get liberty. This place operates at like we libertarians imagine a libertarian utopia will. There's very little crime, vanishingly little crime. And people's families grow up happy. Kids are outside playing and these kind of things. Outside of those walls, gangsters run everything. And the government's constantly worried about what's going on. The government of Choloma and Honduras is worried about what's going on inside of Morazan, because it shows blatantly they can't govern. They're just another set of gangsters is what, ultimately politicians tend to be.
I think Massimo's a kind of unique gentleman as well. I've had a few conversations with him, and he's not a normal kind of rich guy. He thinks differently. He really cares. He still does a town hall every month where they actually
it's like every quarter.
Well, where they actually these guys get to say what they like and don't like about his city.
Do.
Yeah, but like who would do that normally?
Well, think about that for a second. Like, imagine a billionaire, and I don't know how much money Massimo has, but there's something different about billionaires, right? Like they live in a sort of their own sovereign bubble.
Yes,
they can do what they want. Goes down and to Honduras and stands in front of a few hundred. I mean, I would use the term you want, poor people, peasants, and ask them, what do you think about the parking lot?
Yeah.
And it's just incredible to see. I've watched it. Some of these people get passionate about what they're talking about, and they're living hand to mouth. It's difficult in many cases for them to make that $140 a month rent. Now, they know they'd pay the same outside of Morazan, so they endeavor to be the best people they can to stay in it, because Massimo wants competitive wages. And he was making money, by the way. He expected to make money doing Morazan.city, renting out at $140 a month. That wasn't the reason he did it. He did it because he believes in the entrepreneurial community concept. And after reading the book by Calvin Duke, entrepreneurial communities, I agree with him. So Massimo was pivotal in changing my idea in this little area of sort of libertarianism. I'm just amazed at what I see down there. To me, that is the greatest success that libertarians have had in the last half decade.
That's an interesting thought. And the left-wing government's trying to shut it down as we speak.
Yeah.
Which if that doesn't tell you something about life, I don't know what does.
Well, the lefties, they talk about human rights. They don't believe in them. The most dangerous thing to any government, but specifically to a left-wing government, is the idea that anybody would be able to step out of their system. Now, that's what's happening to Hondurans all over the place, is that Hondurans are saying, bye-bye, and they're leaving Honduras because, government's corrupt there, just like it is in a lot of places, but they feel like they can do better in other places. They have a huge brain drain problem. But countries like Venezuela, Cuba, China, they're coming to Honduras and saying, we see what's going on with these Zetes, and this is terrifying to us. So you got to stop it. And they've really had conventions where they've done this. They've said, the thing they shake their fist at isn't the crime, isn't the murder rate, isn't the fact that San Pedro Sula was 10 years ago the kidnap capital of the world. The dangerous thing in their minds is that somebody is free.
They don't necessarily word it like that, do they?
No, they don't.
They would say that someone is stealing our sovereign land.
Yes.
And going against our rules and all this
Sure.
kind of stuff, which is absolutely, they are creating a set of rules.
Yes.
But there's a reason, obviously. And I think, this basically speaks to something that is the most, fundamental problem in this movement, is that most people think that the top-down governance model that we live amongst most of is just the way it is. And I was that guy for very many years, for 45 years of my life.
I think it's a true statement. It is the way it is.
But I mean, I never stopped to think that even that could be contested. Like my whole life has been a journey of contesting things, like from being very young and even in my sort of early 50s, thinking, oh yeah, I've thought that for 50 years, but actually I could think something else. Actually, I could. There probably is another way, and maybe democracy isn't the pinnacle of civilization. Maybe our money system isn't actually. It is weird. It is wrong. It is crap. Actually, I kind of thought it was, but it actually is. Yeah, and actually there is a different version of it that is this one, that, and the other. Yeah.
So I would like to separate the idea of the top-down hierarchical model and democracy. We here in New England have the town meeting, and I lived many, many years in towns that had a town meeting. So what would happen is a few hundred people would go to the school gym, the government school gym, and they'd sit there and, there'd be some warrant articles that would come up and we'd vote on them. In many cases, it was a resounding, the bureaucrats would get up and say, we need more money for the kids to have basketballs and tutors. And, the whole town would go, yay. And I would go, nay. My kid never went to that school, would never go to that school. I'd never ask you to feed my dog or to give my cat water. They're my responsibility. I'm not going to ask you to educate my kid. Now, I've heard the arguments for government schools. I see the model that they're creating, the socialization and blah, 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 blah. But to me, nope, I have no interest in this. So democracy is just essentially two wolves and a sheep deciding on what's for dinner. And 3 individuals is a small group, but it just kind of, the hierarchical model stacks it on top. So currently, here in the United States, Donald Trump just won the election by, the standard that we use, which is the Electoral College model. But he didn't win, to my knowledge, or at least it was very close from an overall vote standpoint. So the people who are advocating for democracy would say, all those people in California should be able to decide how all those people in Utah live. And, it's difficult, right? Like there's momentum to democracy that it just doesn't deserve. I don't want 3 people telling me how I've got to live because they're what we're going to have for dinner or how we're going to live or how much money I've got to pay into a pool or anything like that. Here in the United States, the top 10% of earners pay the vast majority of tax dollars. And the people who are in the bottom half pay almost nothing. So, net nothing.
All right, then. So is it the free city model that's the only model then that actually fits this thing?
The free city model, to me, is the only model that will work. Having been in New Hampshire for 20 years and being a resident of New Hampshire currently, I am just of the opinion that working within the system is trying to slap wings on a tractor and make it fly. That New Hampshire can't be free without seceding from the United States. And the seceding from the United States is a poison pill that will be so awful that I would not recommend it to any patient that I had. That if New Hampshire was to secede from the United States, you could expect the SWIFT banking system to be shut down. You could expect 3-hour waits at the border. Many, many, many Granite State residents work outside of New Hampshire. I mean, I am a resident of Hudson, New Hampshire. Some good portion of the people who live in Nashua and Hudson and all the sort of southern and eastern part of New Hampshire, they work in Boston or the surrounding region. And that's, New Hampshire can't handle being sectioned off in that way. And there's dirty tricks that are played in politics. I don't think that even if we got close to Granite Staters wanting to secede, voting to secede, a Brexit situation, that you would see that the government would allow that. Brexit kind of showed the world that this could happen. Now, I think it's wrong that 50% plus 1 Englishmen get to decide what the other 50% minus 1 do. I think that any vote like this ought to be a supermajority of some sort. 66% is the number I like. But, the governments of the world saw Brexit and they saw, this is counter to our wishes. And seeing that, I think that you would see a post-Brexit secession would probably be undermined by, the forces that like hierarchy. Let's put it together for a second. Just imagine, this has been, I don't know what it's like in Europe, but in the United States, we believe in agents provocateur. And if you can imagine some, group of cops, I don't know if they're FBI, I don't know if they're marshals, I don't know what they are, but a dozen of them, hey boys, we got to stop this whole secession thing. They just go out, they set a few cars on fire, they say, with their masks on, and they say, we're free staters and we hate the government. And Granite Staters are like, this is what we're voting for? No thanks. It would undermine everything. It's the reason that I think that the Free State Project is great, awesome for people who want to be involved in government and the invigorating battle for freedom, the struggle for freedom. I think it's really good for that. I also think that if you're a libertarian in New England, what are you doing living in Massachusetts or Connecticut? You should move to New Hampshire. But I don't think that if you want to be free, that New Hampshire's the place to go. And here's the first thing, right now, if you're like, I want to be free, the first thing you ought to do is look at the jurisdictions around the world and decide what they offer. Because for most people, they offer mom and a job. Those are the number one reasons that people live in a given geographic area. So if you have a job where you can work from anywhere, then, post-COVID, you're blessed. And you might be able to make this decision. But then these are the number one and number two things that most people are making their decision on. Now, maybe you want to be able to smoke marijuana. Well, perhaps Washington State or Colorado is a good place for you. Maybe you want no income tax. There are jurisdictions around the world where, that your tax bracket will be very, very, very low. But maybe you want the great malls and lifestyle of Hollywood, California. Well, there's only one place that you can do that. So you have to kind of look at where you want to live based on a happiness quotient, not on a liberty quotient. And most people are happy if they have a job and they're near their family.
Okay, then. I that's a good way to think about it. But I suppose for a lot of people, though, happiness is tantamount to freedom, at least in their own mind.
Sure, absolutely. What the point that I like to make to because free staters are as bad as Bitcoin maxis for their love of their given thing. I like to say they're worse than Texans. So when I say that you shouldn't move to the Free State Project, there's 100 sphincters that tighten around New Hampshire, and what I like to point out is that if and I've had a big clarion voice for a long time, if I advocate that a given person moves to New Hampshire and they listen to me based on, a bad set of reasoning, then I have some level of responsibility for them moving here. And it's costly to move. For everybody moving, it's costly. It's always, this big amount of your sort of net worth. The more you have, the more it costs to move. I know a guy who moved horses from Wyoming to be here. And, it just comes down. I know a person who hopped on a bus in Texas, but it was still costly for him because it was a lot of money for him. So I don't want somebody to move and then say, this isn't everything I imagined it to be, and then decide to leave. And that happens over and over again. I think the best thing to do is to clearly state what you'll get when you move to New Hampshire, Prospera, Morazan, any given place, and allow people to make the best decision for them. I think that New Hampshire's really wonderful if you want to talk about freedom. If you want to go to a bar on a Wednesday night and chat with other libertarians about all the different things with the same point of view, it is really good for that. If you go to PorcFest or Liberty Forum or one of these events that we have here in New Hampshire, you'll be surrounded by people. It's a high, it's a euphoria for many people when they go to these places and they have this experience. And I would recommend to any libertarian, come to New Hampshire for a week, go to PorcFest and experience it. Because even for those of us who live in New Hampshire, there's nothing like PorcFest, the Porcupine Freedom Festival. It's at porcfest.com.
Yeah, at PorcFest, because I wanted to go. It looks great. But at PorcFest, are there people advocating for other places there, or is it very New Hampshire state? I mean, very New Hampshire sort of focused, because like what you just said, there are pretty good places to find probably more freedom than this in other parts of the world currently. Is that something people advocate for at PorcFest, or is it get talked about here?
I've been on stage, advocated for what is now Prospera. At the time, I wasn't allowed to say anything. Eric Bremen asked me not to reveal anything, so I kept I kept myself vague and just talked about the concept of a Zete. And there have been little booths where you can. So PorcFest isn't like a convention; it's a campground. And so people will set up booths at their campground. So it's a very, and usually you go to a convention, there's booth. At PorcFest, it's booth, and then, the space of 10 booth spaces, and then another booth, and then 10 spaces, and then another booth. And so it's a much bigger walk. But when people that are there all week, sleeping in tents and, hanging out, they have a lot of time to talk. So yes, we talk about those. Yes, there's opportunities to talk about other places, but mostly it's New Hampshire centric.
I was going to say, and it just sounded like you you're being realistic about New Hampshire. And, I like the analogy you made with Bitcoin maxis. I'm a Bitcoin maxi.
I am a Bitcoin OG.
But I also don't try and convince people to buy Bitcoin, or I try and convince people to learn about Bitcoin. But
boy, did I!
I never could try and convince people to buy it for the same reason you don't want to convince people to come here. You want people to get as much factual information as they can, and then decide to come here themselves realistically. But so really,
I think I would advocate buying Bitcoin right now for anybody listening. I do believe that there is a great deal of upside from an investment standpoint. And I think that's what Bitcoin's the very best at, is it is essentially turned into a digital asset. And I think the crypto space is great because it can show the Bitcoin people what is the most desired new crypto thing that we should, bring into cryptocurrency. So as you were saying, privacy is being worked on, and Bitcoin, and what we called privacy in 2011 when I started in Bitcoin is different than what we call privacy now at 2025.
I mean, it's still private though, isn't it? It's the same. It's the same thing. It's like I want to have an anonymous transaction with you, and I want to try and make it future proof. Like when computers can run so fast that they can think everything in the flash of an eye, will they still be able to work out what's happened?
I don't know, and I hope that the crossbow gets bigger and stronger, and over time more robust. I would say that Bitcoin was anything but private in, say, 2014, 15, 16.
The interesting thing, though, about Bitcoin, which is kind of undeniable, it's unalienable, I think, is the fact that it was a really important invention in the digital realm. So it was something in the digital realm that needed to be discovered, like scarcity in the digital realm. So that, for me, that underpins it all, obviously, because I think what a lot of people, when they have that realization that you've had, that, it's not that private, actually, it's not that, they start thinking, maybe we should try and, maybe what else is out there, kind of thing. That's not my response. My response, because I go back to the fact that this was a necessary discovery or invention within the digital realm, which is digital scarcity. Actually, in physical scarcity, we can do that. Yep. Digital scarcity, wow, that's difficult. But actually, now we've got it. Now we have the option to be able to transfer property between each other in the digital space, which has to be there in order to have all the things we need: property rights, privacy, ownership. We need it for that. So I don't now think, right, we need something else. I think, no, now we need to work more on this thing that we've discovered. Like we discovered this thing. Yep. Now we need to make it private. How we do that is unfortunately beyond my pay grade. Kind of. Well,
for me, I was a big blocker in World War Geek. For those that know what I'm, the shorthand I've just used there, they get it completely. For those that don't, I'll explain it. There was, for some years, this argument within Bitcoin, should the block size be increased to something larger, or should it remain the same at the temporary cap that Satoshi put it at? And if you want to know more, you can read Hijacking Bitcoin by Roger Ver. I am not going to go any further than that.
Or the block size wars I think it's better, actually.
It's a better term. I like World War Geek because it amuses me.
No, the book, the block size wars.
Okay.
Have you not read it?
I haven't.
It's a very extensive breakdown of everything that went on. I like it anyway.
Okay. And right, it's always good to get both sides of these. I was a big blocker, and I saw what I believed to be manipulations and a minority of people, imposing their will upon a majority, and a variety of things. I essentially became black-pilled for some period of time. And then I went to well, I went to a series of conventions because I'm a Bitcoin OG and people asked me to MC these events and things like that. And I began to see more and more work that's being done in Bitcoin, that's being worked on it. And I went to, I can't remember what it was called, but it was in Singapore last year. It was called Token 2050, maybe. And this convention, I got to see a lot of places that are working specifically on Bitcoin, to the exclusion of other cryptocurrencies. And I had this glimmer of hope that is now an ember in my eye and my heart that I hope will, come into something more. Again, I don't think that Bitcoin is as powerful and pivotal as it was during the blockchain wars. I feel like it could have been something incredible. Now, would it have been an MVP, a minimum viable product rolled out to the world? Maybe. And there certainly would have been problems. There have been all kinds of problems with Bitcoin. And is slower growth a better thing? I don't know the answer to any of these. I can't say. All I can do is sit at history, that's moment in time and talk about what I know and what I have learned. And my statement is I have a lot of hope for where Bitcoin goes. But I wouldn't exclude any particular cryptocurrency. And I think that the best thing that they offer right now is, it's the variety of things that are going on. People are trying different stuff. Maybe those things can be brought together into the best coin. I hope that coin's Bitcoin. I really do. Because I've got it.
Well, yeah, there's that. But I don't know. I think, like I say, I go back to the discovery of digital scarcity again.
I think that's the best thing. I agree with you. 100%.
But it's hard to argue. It's like if you use another analogy, like the discovery of fire, we invented lighters and we invented stoves and we invented, but we didn't create a new version of fire.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like that's how I see it. And so as a result, I think, yes, there are thousands of cryptocurrencies, obviously, and I'm not someone who cares less about any of them, and mainly because, well, almost specifically because Bitcoin has documentable decentralization and ease of access and ease of using and ease of auditing, all the things that I don't see in other blockchains, Bitcoin has. And there are only a few fundamental things that I need out of my money. You know what I mean? And Bitcoin has them all, other than, sure, some magical, anonymity. But we know from life that you can't be open and free and completely anonymous at the same time. At the moment,
that's true.
But do you know what I mean? Like you either want it to be auditable, or you want it to be private. I suppose I don't really know because cryptography is amazing, obviously.
Right.
And
above my pay grade.
Right, and even when you think about it, in someone very knowledgeable explained it to me, and I still remember them saying, you can, if you get two numbers and you multiply them together, 2 times 3 equals 6. You can't work back from 6 to get 2 times 3. That's how cryptography works. You can guess, but it might be 3 plus 3. It might be 2 plus 2 plus 2. It might be 6 times 1.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, that's how cryptography works. And it's like, yeah, cool. But Bitcoin needs to be, in many ways, auditable for us to know that no one's fucking with it, no one's doing this, that, and the other. And in my mind, that means, it needs to be visible. But cryptographers, they're like astrophysicists. They think differently to normal people. They think about quantum things and kind of understand them, kind of. Whereas I don't know what the fuck's going on here.
So these crypto anarchists, the crypto geeks that existed in the past, and they exist now, they're essentially the same personality model. That person says, I wonder what we could do this. I wonder what we could do that. So they're kind of messing with things and trying to create things. And they came up with Bitcoin. Now with the post World War Geek or the blocksize wars or whatever you want to call it, post that, many people are like, well, let's just create our own coin. And there are thousands of them. And I may be understating it when I say thousands. There are tens of thousands. And any one of them may be a better invention than any of the top 5 coins that are out there. Top 10, let's say use top 10 coins. But the problem that they face is, as humans, we have a gelatinous, real-world mind. It doesn't work like a computer. It's not going to go through and say, this coin's the best, and then we all come and end up on the same coin. That may work with AI, I have no clue. But it doesn't work with humans. Humans can make a decision when you offer them 3, 5, at the outset, 10 options. They can't make a decision amongst 1,000 things. And so Bitcoin has this, it's the automatic decision that we're currently at. And I think that Ethereum, to some extent, might be sitting within this. And there's a few others that are sitting out there. But Ethereum isn't even a cryptocurrency. It's a platform upon which one uses a cryptocurrency that's in there. And then, it was just an idea. And I wonder to myself, whether, to me, what that means is that Bitcoin has a great deal of first mover advantage, and that it's possibly unassailable even now.
Well, I think it probably is as well, because you can't, when you think about money in its, what, if you've gone down that rabbit hole, you know what money means to a degree, and you can't invent a new money. And again, now in the digital world, I don't think, because people will it'll be priced in, or people will be second guessing what you're doing. And this is what's happening with every other cryptocurrency that's trying to be money. Not that a lot of them are anymore. I think they're realizing that there is a money, there's Bitcoin. But the adoption rate of Bitcoin and the way that it sort of like became part of everyone's lives happened it was like in an immaculate way, because no one knew what it was. And by the time it has got to this point where I agree with you, it's kind of like the point of no return. It's now unstoppable. All of these things could have, if people had understood in the entirety of what was going on, it would have been different. And so, for example, now you can fork Bitcoin tomorrow and release it.
Yep.
And it's the same.
Bitcoin mark.
Bitcoin 2025, and it doesn't matter.
Yep.
It doesn't matter. Right. No one's going to buy it. No one's going to use it. And that's good as far as I'm concerned, because Bitcoin is an anarchistic protocol. Anyone can use it. You can't control it. You either join it or you don't. It's opt-in, and things can change, it
is very much like the free private cities we're talking about. Any given city will have its own mayor or ruler or owner or anything like that, as Blockstream currently has a great deal of control over Bitcoin, but you choose whether you go there or not. And I don't know. I don't know what's going to happen. If you want anonymity, use your Bitcoin to buy Monero or Zano. Do your transaction on the dark web. Get your zoom zooms and whams delivered to, in a private package to your, mailbox, the private mailbox that's not at your home or anything like that. But that's about the best use of privacy within cryptocurrency, it seems to me. And that would be the only thing that I would say.
I'd say there's a lot better ways to be private on Bitcoin, but that is for another. Go back to one of our. I'll put it in the show notes. We've
you
done
shouldn't
a whole
take
episode.
advice from me on how to buy on the dark web. I have literally never done it.
But what
I did do an interview with Dread Pirate Roberts before whatever happened with Ross happened.
But what I was going to say was, instead of trying to be, if you look at the reason why you have to go through all those steps to be that private, it's because of where you live. So
sure.
Why not change the way you live?
Right.
Go somewhere where Bitcoin is accepted and used freely, and no one cares that they might be able to track everything you're doing. Because the amount of anonymity you can get on Bitcoin, which I think you're probably missing a few of the very latest, privacy techniques.
Oh, sure.
Privacy, it's only a big deal here because there are people who don't want you to use Bitcoin. So go somewhere where they do want you to use Bitcoin. And I would imagine that
this is almost everywhere in the world right now.
The world will probably bifurcate, obviously. Bitcoin's a freedom tool, just like a lot of things. And if your freedom tool is being banned, then you're in the wrong country. Unless you want to just do it subversively, which is fine. You can do it subversively, but I think...
Well, Trump has said he's going to make Bitcoin great again. So let's hope that he sticks by his word. He said he ended the war on Bitcoin, and I think now we need to release the POWs. And I would hope that one day soon, my business partner, Ian Freeman, is free in whatever way that might be. I don't know if it's clemency. I don't know if it's a pardon. I don't know if it's the courts doing the right thing. Who has any idea? But
unfortunately, I know that's what Trump said. I don't necessarily trust that about him. And I'll tell you why, because I'd listened to a number of Trump speeches prior to him being elected this time. And I thought, good speaker, and then he spoke at the Bitcoin conference and I realized he didn't know what he's talking about. It was complete bullshit what he said at the Bitcoin conference. And I thought, shit, maybe he's bullshitting in every speech he's doing then, I don't know. Like,
to get where he is, you need to put together coalitions. And again, we'll talk about this squishy little piece of fat that we have called a brain. You can't learn everything about everything. He's never going to know as much about Bitcoin. You've already ferreted out that you know more about Bitcoin in its current form than I do, right? And I know infinitely more about Bitcoin than Trump does, because he's busy running around trying to figure out how he's going to put together these coalitions and that kind of thing. Donald Trump wanted to be president, and he would do and say what it took to be president. And I think that's a good path. If you're like, here's my goal, how do I get there? What's the minimum amount of calories and money and energy that I need to do to get from here to there? And I'm fine with that particular model, so long as what he says is I'm going to put somebody in charge of Bitcoin that knows what they're talking about. And that person, whomever they might be at some point or another, and I'm not saying they're in charge of Bitcoin, but they're in charge of the government's liaison, Bitcoin strategist, or whatever we're going to call them, the U.S. government's. I'm fine with that, because the Biden administration definitely had that. They definitely had people who understood cryptocurrency and hated it. And the idea that somebody who, I'll take somebody who understands cryptocurrency and is neutral on it as a step up from the Biden administration.
No, I'm with you on that one. It was a a sigh of relief to European Bitcoiners. I wouldn't say Europe in general, because I think most Europeans really don't like Trump, and it's because they haven't really thought it through. No. I think, to be honest.
I don't think most Englishmen like Trump from my experience when I was there. But
how long ago was that? Because things are changing slightly. Like
2 summers ago?
Oh, yeah. Things have changed since then. Mm-hmm. We now have a kind of progressive, annoying left-wing bunch of leeches in power. I mean, the last government were pretty uninspiring, but this lot are now not even business people. They're just the epitome of what you hate about non-productive politicians. And they're even like not very interesting as people, and it's the worst.
Trump's certainly interesting.
Right. Well, yeah, but also Trump actually puts himself out there, and I thought the election this year was phenomenal to observe, because it showed you the two types of political strategy. One is the soundbite, feeding the narrative from above and then spewing it out. And it only works when you have complete control over the media. Yep. And then there was the other side, all going on podcasts for 3 hours, swearing and farting and, and you're like, wow, this is what this guy actually thinks. Because, you and me, we know this. When you talk for a living, you can't hide the truth.
You can't hide it.
In the end, the AI will work out what you actually mean.
I love that you've said that. Is this that, if you want to know the truth about a person, just find somebody who's talked for 400 hours on a free-form podcast, and you will know that they're telling the truth, because you can't hide the truth about you. I mean, I can't tell you how many thousands, maybe tens of thousands, certainly 10,000, maybe tens of thousands of hours I've done of live radio. Now, my opinion has changed throughout the 2 decades I've been doing podcasts and radio, But at the very least, you can see that evolution and what there is about me. It's clear. I value honesty, sound money, freedom. These are my core values. You just can't hide all of that.
And, that's the new... I think a lot of the world saw that this time. I think we all saw it the first time Trump won, actually. Mm-hmm. And Brexit, another good example. It was like people voted to leave the EU as a fuck you. It wasn't that they even looked at we need to do this. It was like most people were like, these annoying guys want me to say something, so I'm gonna vote the other way. You know? And now we see, with the prevalence of long form discussion, which is now the preferred choice of consuming ideas, I would imagine. I think how many people watch TV now and stuff like that anymore? It's like
I think podcasts. I mean, people still want the condensed version. There's a lot of people who still want the condensed version. That's why memes are popular, because you can only put so many words in the given square. But I do think that there's enough people who are consuming the long form and then condensing it down to the short form that truth might be winning.
That's what I mean then. Podcast is the base layer of the media at the moment. Yeah. And that layer 2 might be aggregators that put together, or even reels, whatever, sound bites, this kind of stuff. But I think that's an emerging market. I think an emerging place will be some AI that aggregates what you normally listen to and turns it into something digestible. Because you can AI will already write a whole podcast for you, won't it? Yep. It's crazy. I've
never done anything like that. I don't know how it does it.
I've done it. It's very easy, right? I'll give you an example. Google something. It's part of their suite of products. Mm-hmm. You can point their AI at any PDF or any written book or anything, and it will turn it into a 10-minute discussion between two people, indistinguishable from a normal conversation, with anecdotes and little quips and jokes and all this kind of stuff. And
imagine what it'll be like in 5 years.
Oh, exactly. Imagine 500 years. Well, no, but seriously, exactly. This thing is and what do we have? Like, once again, I go back to the fundamentals. When I start thinking about, oh my God, this is crazy. What's happening? I go back to what have humans always done to convey, things to each other. Stories around a fire, talking. I've reconvened on talking. I've been through photography, filmmaking, all these different ways of kind of reaching out to people. And I've come back to speaking. And speaking is now available across space and time. We didn't, it used to be around the fire, and then it became the radio, and then it became the TV, but they were all one way, apart from the fire. The fireplace one was the best one. Yeah. Sitting in the cave, talking about, now we're back to that. And you can hear it at any time in space or time. So this is incredible.
I think it's terrifying in some ways, because if you think about the power that the high verbal IQ person has always had, the orator, that person is able to convince others and I know because I did it for 20 years. I was known as the voice of reason on Free Talk Live, and I took that title very seriously. I like to believe that I was reasonable. And when AI comes out and creates a new Mark Edge, and maybe even uses that name, and then begins to convince people of things that I wouldn't otherwise convince them of, because that high verbal IQ is something that it can put together. It has that.
Well, it has 10,000 hours of you. It knows who you are if it wants to. But that's where cryptography comes back in, because new networks, cryptographically secure networks, are being developed now. Nostr is the perfect one. I don't know whether you know what Nostr is, do you?
I don't.
Oh my God. Well, we're not going to talk about it now, but I've done lots of episodes on Nostr.
Okay. Well, send me your favorite one.
Okay. Needless to say, you can identify yourself cryptographically. You can imagine that, can't you? It's quite easy to signing things cryptographically, right? Networks that do that are the future of truth, or at least of knowing that it was the real Mark Edge that said it. Mm-hmm. And they're in development now. I'm already on social networks that are based on these protocols, So that's all, like all these things are in the pipeline and happening. As one new problem springs up, there's a bunch of geeks out there doing it, and then there's people like you and me that tell everyone about it, and then it hopefully becomes adopted. I don't know by how many, because I think most people are not that bothered about this kind of stuff. I think a lot of people don't care. They'll get in that car. They don't care. Google's tracking them.
Yeah, I do. I really love that the car is basically driving itself. I have this story. So last year when I went to Prague for the Liberty in Our Lifetime event, you can go ahead and search that. That's the Free Cities event, and
it's changed.
I recommend you.
It's changed. It's called the Free Cities Conference now.
Free Cities Conference.
Exactly. Huh. Well, because everyone was calling it that, weren't they?
Yeah, I think it's a good name for it, as a matter of fact.
We've changed it for next year, just so that people know. Well, everyone was calling it the Free Cities Conference. No one ever said Liberty in Our Lifetime. They said, you going to the Free Cities Conference? Yeah.
Yeah, you're right. Yeah, that's a good idea. You should, and we have to bend to the market.
Yeah.
It was a great event, and I recommend anyone to go. I really thought it was wonderful. Anyway, I ended up, I wanted to go with Massimo Mazzoni and my business partner, Alex Udgorgi, who won an award at last year's event. And his girlfriend was, all four of us were met in Monaco. And Massimo has this, of course, he's a wealthy man. He has this BMW X7M6. I might have some.
He's got a few cars, because I saw him driving I saw him driving a Ferrari around as well. Yeah.
He's got a lovely little Ferrari he left that for the friend I was traveling with, and this car, it's brand new, €150,000 SUV, is got all the bells and whistles that anything could possibly have. I've never driven a finer automobile, and I'm not a man who has lived in a cave, okay, as I've been around a few. And I found out relatively quickly, Massimo is a different sort of driver, has a different sensibilities around driving than I do.
Italian.
Cool. And my friend Alex is way too autistic and scatterbrained to be in charge of a vehicle. And his girlfriend largely doesn't speak English and is not familiar with, new tech. So I ended up being the chauffeur for this particular event, which few people say, Mark, that's the guy you want driving. But in this case, essentially all I was doing was feeding information into the autopilot. I've got the cruise control set. It stops in front of other cars. It does the lane keeping. When I wanted to change lane, there was a little toggle switch on the steering wheel that I just flipped, and the vehicle would move over to another lane on its own. Highly responsive and these kind of things. And, this kind of technology is great, but you're right. It comes in with, they knew where we were at every moment.
They knew what your heartbeat was as well, probably. They knew what you were,
Yeah.
That's what I don't like about it, because in the same way that you didn't predict that Bitcoin would be trackable because of AI.
Yeah.
I think AI will be, you can easily predict that with the right amount of information about you, and probably not even that much. I mean, for you and I, obviously, there's so much of us speaking out there.
Yeah.
There's already a lot of info out there. But when you start adding that to all this new data that is picking up from you, heat, temperature, expressions on your faces, all this kind of stuff, we're in a very tight predicament as far as if you really want to be private goes. And I think privacy and freedom are bedfellows, aren't they?
They are. Did you ever see the Captain America Winter Soldier movie?
No.
I think that this is really important for every libertarian to see.
Winter Soldier.
Yeah.
Captain America. Right. Okay.
So it's the second in Captain America movie. And in it, they have this, flying platform that is sort of run on AI. It has a computer program in it, and it assassinates. It's made to assassinate the top. These aren't the good guys. These are the bad guys. These are the Nazis who left Germany and infiltrated world government for the last 50 years, and then created this platform. Is the premise of the bad guy.
It's based on true life.
Well, that's one of the reasons I like this movie so much. And the other thing it sort of revealed to me is that this platform is made to, hunt down the top 20,000 most influential people who are sort of anti-government and shoot them while they're pushing their kids on the swing set or whatever. Now, if this were to happen, imagine for a second right now that the snap of a finger, and these people are assassinated in a way that only the government could have done. What would happen? And I think very much that without these heads of the snake, as it were, that everybody would just fall in line. There's the thinkers out there that are pushing freedom in our case. There are other dangerous ideas out there that we don't support, and the government would be happy to kill those people too. But eliminate those thought processes, I guess, is probably the better way to describe that. And without us pushing and pushing and pushing, there's only the people that are working within the private realms. And those people aren't going to break their privacy because they're just not that personality type. We're the personality type that it's fine. Go ahead. Put a bullet in me. I'm going to speak my highest truth. But there's people that are out there that are creating that truth that I then get. I'm not, every idea that I have spoken isn't my own. I didn't create these ideas. I'm a mouthpiece for these ideas.
Come on then. I'm going to wrap it up, but I want to end on a positive note.
I want you to too. No, I'm not very good at this,
You're
though.
going to end on a positive note. My positive note is always that this is an age-old battle that's being fought continuously forever. We know all you have to do is choose a side. And if you choose a side and you feel good, that's it. And I do. I have chosen a choice. I made a choice. I like freedom lovers. I like people who have roughly the same kind of ideals as me. And as a result, we get on like a house on fire. There's a lot of love between everyone and life is good. And if the line in the sand pushes too far, I'll move. Mm-hmm. I'm a stay and fight guy, but not really fight. You know what I mean? Like, yep. I'm normally thinking ahead. So also I can live with that. I'm normally thinking ahead on behalf of, at the moment, my family. Yeah. You know what I mean? Like, I'm thinking, okay, my kids are just living their best life. Sure. And I don't want them to think about this. I'm happy to think about this. I'll make sure that they're in the right place so that they can just, and that's fine by me. I'm good. I'm good with that. I know my friends are. I know my colleagues are. I know what's going on. And if the bad guys are around, then I'll just shine my light on them. That's What about you?
I think that the arc of history does bend towards freedom. I think that, like the book Sapiens, that one of the things that he doesn't discuss in there is how the agrarian revolution necessitated a sort of hierarchical model where you have the master servant, king's serfs, this kind of thing put together. And since then, the servants have been getting more and more of their freedom over time, and the masters really don't like it. I mean, they really just dislike it. But I think that I think there is hope. But to me, that shining beacon of hope is truly free cities. And it's the reason that I've dedicated all the time that I can dedicate. I'm currently doing this interview because I was willing to fly 1,500 miles to make sure that I was here for this interview to be able to do it with you. And I suspect there aren't many people who have flown for an interview besides yourself on your podcast, because I think that, you generally go to them. I think that this is so important that I want to be and do what I can for this movement. I spent all of my life, my career, promoting the Free State Project in New Hampshire. And I still think it's a good idea for the right people. But I think that free cities can offer this customized happiness, this customized freedom that nothing else can do. And I'll do whatever it takes. I'll spend what I can spend. I will give my time and my energy as much as I possibly can to this idea. I consider myself one of the apostles, and I hope to be the original apostle, one of the original apostles in this whole thing. There are other great names. I've mentioned them here, and I hope that there are many more that come along. But to me, free cities is our single best hope. 1,000, 10,000 lights of every form of freedom that people want, and competing against each other for people's time and attention, and coming up with the very best form. When I go to a hotel or resort, I don't ask myself, which political party has control of this resort? I wonder how the manager of this resort thinks on guns or abortion. I never ask myself those questions. I mean, I do now because say that I don't. But it's inconsequential to my experience there. What's consequential, and like owning a gun isn't that meaningful to me. What I like is a society where people can own guns. And abortion isn't, now that I'm a little older, I'm not going to be, not knocking chicks up and things like that. Not important to me. But I think that, the freedom, the conversation around freedom is important. I'm not going to advocate for or against abortion. My position on abortion is so utterly distasteful, it is best to just keep to myself.
What is it?
My opinion on abortion is that the people that want abortions the most are the ones that deserve them the most.
Wow. I could be classed as distasteful. But
it's really awful.
I don't know.
The number one way you're going to vote is the way that mom voted. The number two way you're going to vote is the way dad voted. And
I thought it was the other way around.
You're thinking that most families especially where abortions are concerned, are not a family. And right. Dad is not present in 100% of families. So therefore it's mom who ends up number one. Now, in two-person families with children, yes, it's dad.
Abortion's such a funny thing, isn't it? Like I mean, not abortion itself. I mean the debate on it.
The debate,
because we don't have that debate in the UK, and when I do have that debate, I don't think you can. I don't think that both sides have got a very good point. Very good point.
Yep.
So what's the point? So what's the answer? I don't know.
I don't think that the people that you would force to have children that don't want them are going to raise very good children.
Exactly. Yeah.
And I'm like, well, maybe I don't want that happening.
Yeah, but even that's a compelling argument. There's so many compelling arguments. So, you shouldn't kill a human. Correct. But what about?
Yeah, right.
But actually, you could, it's like, God, I don't know. I think that's why we don't have that debate in the UK.
Yeah.
Because it's like it just divides people.
Yep. It's just a eugenics conversation is ultimately what it comes down to. And nobody wants to have a eugenics conversation, right?
I don't know.
Right. Well, there you are. The best argument is to cull the bottom 50%. And then you just have to to decide what is the metric upon which we rate these people. Because I could very well be in that bottom 50% right now.
So what? We're not ending on eugenics.
Well, you're just going to cut this up and do what you want with it.
I'm not.
You're not? This is a long-form conversation?
Of course it is. Let's finish on a positive note because you were making a very good point there, which was, and that's what I've gleaned from this conversation is that, because you're a kind of what I would call a real libertarian.
Okay.
Well, no, but do you know what I mean? Like, you live and breathe it. You know about the politics of it. You know about the different types of libertarianism. You know about all this, right? So
sure.
I appreciate your opinion on libertarianism, right? And you've told me that you think that the free city model is the only one that's actually going to work long term in the future.
Yeah,
that's fine by me. I'm going to commit that to part of my repertoire of ideas now because I've heard it from you.
Well, let me give you one more thing. You were talking about your children and how you just want to create a space for them to be them. Throughout history, we've seen that the revolutionaries will go and they'll create this thing, this idea. I like to use Quakers. I consider them to be the proto-libertarians, and I have studied them a great deal to think about. I mean, these people believed very strongly in what they believed. They were willing to come to, places like Boston and preach their stuff to the Puritans. Not exactly the most flexible crowd. They killed 4 of the Quakers. There's a statue to Mary Dyer, really unfortunate last name. They're in Boston currently. They tarred and feathered her, and did whatever they did. I don't know how they killed her, but it wasn't pleasant. And so they create the new world, but their kids often don't have the same passion. So what I would say to people, my libertarian revolutionaries, or evolutionaries, if you want to use that terminology, is we got to get about the business of doing this, because our kids aren't going to have the same motivation. The Quakers that joined the movement because they were sick and tired of England's wars were not the same people as their children who grew up in Quakerdom. And that will be true for us and our kids. So I do hope that we can find some place where we can, create this free city. And once the first one's made, then I think we'll make a few more. Once you've got one shining example, I think that Prospera is a hope. I hope that Prospera works, but it is dangling by a thread in many ways with the Honduran government and the things that are going on. So I think that that this is our best, greatest hope, and we need to get about this work.
Well, I would say amen to that as well. And yeah, I agree. I think we're doers, fortunately. We're at that end of the spectrum. We're the kind of actual doers. And I like that about this movement. There's a lot of different facets to it, but at the Free Private Cities end, they're all people that are they like actually building things out of real things. Mm. So I am almost certain that, as I can be, that it will transpire in the end. I don't see how it can't, because I've been through the thought process myself and concluded that after. And I think in the end, everyone will. It's not. And I'm not saying it's a new idea, but it's coming out again. This idea, and I think that people start thinking an idea, and then slowly but surely it sort of moves out into the general consensus. As I've seen many ideas recently, even crazy things like people liking Trump. Remember 2 years ago when everyone hated Trump? I'm talking about not everyone, but a lot of people, your liberal friends who hated Trump.
All you have to do is look at his approval numbers, and you will see that there's been a dramatic shift in what people think about Donald Trump.
Exactly, right. This is the age we live in. And the Free Cities idea, the idea of, opting into contract-based places where you know what the rules are and you choose to adopt those rules, and if you don't like them, you go somewhere else. That, as an idea, is emerging now, and when you think it through, it makes a lot of sense. And I think in the end it will happen. It's already happening. We see it, like you say, in Honduras, and I'm quite positive about Honduras, because I think either way the lesson is being learned, and I don't think a world exists where the first mover doesn't face this kind of pushback.
The pioneers get the slings and arrows, right?
Exactly. How can that not be true? And they will, if they don't win, someone else will, and they will all serve as lessons on how to adopt and print these principles and how to make them work as best as possible.
I hope what you're saying is true for the Honduran people, for libertarians, and for the world at large.
Yes. Well, Mark, thanks for popping in to your studio. I feel like I'm a radio host now. I really like it here. I can imagine sitting here for hours and hours just talking. I know. It must be really good fun. I think unfortunately, I'm a kind of go and meet people person, which, as you can see, is a pain in the arse sometimes. You have to lug cameras around with you and all this stuff. But the thought of being in a place like this and just broadcasting out ideas must have been so much fun. Why'd you give it up, just out of interest? Or
So essentially, Bitcoin killed Free Talk Live. It's funny, isn't it?
What you mean? People got too rich off it, and then
That's exactly.
Oh,
whoa!
shit.
What an active mind you've got that you're able to jump to the conclusions to do it. Is right. I mean, that Free Talk Live was a business that allowed me to live in a somewhere between middle class and upper middle class lifestyle.
But don't you want to do it as a hobby then?
I
mean, that's the theory, right? The theory, one of the theories is Bitcoin liberates you from the daily drudgery of life, and you can focus on something you really love, which for me, this would be it. Yep. Having a studio and just putting it out there and putting it out to the people,
The day-to-day of a 7-day-a-week podcast is a lot. And with Ian in prison, it's very difficult. Yeah, it's.
Did he kind of sit here where I'm sitting? And
yes.
And you just riff between each other.
Oh, absolutely.
I
made a living arguing with Ian for 20 years.
But so if he came out, do you think you would fire it back up again?
I'd be interested in what Ian had to say on that topic.
He'll have a load of new interesting. Perspectives, I would imagine, wouldn't he?
Sure.
I'm about to talk to Bonnie, but I'll get more. I was going to save that conversation for speaking to her, but that seems like a very. I don't know. Do you think about scaling it more and all these kind of things?
The scaling of Free Talk Live is complicated. It started out as something completely different than what it is today. So we were one of the first podcasts in the world. We were a podcast before a podcast before the word existed. We put MP3s up on the internet, and you had to go get them, as opposed to it being delivered to you by a really simple server. But we have MP3s going back to our very first episode, and in I should say November 2002, and as a radio program, you're competing against whatever anybody would put on the dial at a given time. As a podcast, you're competing against 10,000 chicks on Twitch who are just barely have their tops on, who are talking about vapidity or whatever they've got going on. So there's just a lot more vying for people's attention than there was. The model that we had we brought in $25,000 a month in ad revenue in the past. In many cases, that was 80% in cryptocurrency, Bitcoin first and then other cryptocurrencies. And, we were the launching point for many S coins that have since failed, and who knows whether these things are going to work or not. But the model has just kind of changed.
But I think the listeners are there. If my podcast is anything to go by, it's just evolving slowly as people turn on to the ideas. What I think is that might be a game changer, though, and this is another AI application, is auto translation of your podcast. Imagine from my perspective, imagine when I can listen to what Chinese people are talking about on their podcasts. But now imagine what Chinese people might think of this podcast.
Well, I think that in many cases, Free Talk Live was a learning platform for people who wanted to learn English. There's a few different accents out there, yours and mine being amongst the very best. People wanted to learn those accents. They also want that, if you've heard it, the cadence that I have. I can be very, very quick in the way that I speak. They want to be able to understand that and then to replicate it and those kind of things. So we were the, senior level English teaching for, a lot of Southeast Asia was just downloading our show. We were getting 500,000 downloads a month for, some time. We were the number one podcast in the world before Joe Rogan came along.
What's the current state of LRN then?
LRN basically
Free Talk Live.
Then. Yeah, LRN is now only Free Talk Live, just because nobody wants to manage Ian's hobby while Ian's in prison, and Free Talk Live is not on nearly as many stations and not getting the downloads that it was. I can't tell you.
But how often is it going out?
Free Talk Live is doing 2 episodes a week.
And what did it used to do?
7.
What does it need to get back up and running then?
I don't know. I haven't spent any time. I wouldn't be willing to spend a lot of brain power on it until I spoke to Ian and found out what he wanted to do.
Oh, okay.
I believe strongly, that if Ian has to change his life dramatically in order to not go to prison again. Are you familiar with a man named Jim Bell?
No.
Okay. Jim Bell wrote an essay in the 90s called Assassination Politics. And in it, he predicted I don't know that it was his prediction, but he discussed a private cryptocurrency that would allow somebody to go on the dark net and bet in Deadpools on, whomever, but presumably on politicians and world leaders. Let's say, and what he claimed is that this would allow the individual much more autonomy in their rulers, more of a say. So if I could go on and who's the least favorite politician in the world? Kim Jong-un? The Ayatollah Khomeini?
We've got one.
Well, let's go with ones that keep us safe. So we'll say the Ayatollah Khomeini is for many people dislike him for whatever reason. So if I cared, and I do not, if somebody cared, they can bet $1 million in cryptocurrency held in a escrow that the Ayatollah Khomeini will die in on January 1st, 2035. And then somebody would say, you know what? Pow! I think he dies now. And then collects that money. That would allow people a greater say in their own form of governance. And
kind of, yeah.
You can imagine how the FBI felt about Jim Bell's essay.
Was it written like a kind of idea, or was it written like a story?
It was a story idea, but I mean, it was just an idea so dangerous to the current model that Jim Bell had to go. And they cooked up, a story, convicted him, sent him to prison. He got out. And he didn't change his ways. And they went after him again. And I think that this is what's going to happen with Ian if he continues to do what he's done. And here's why. Ian has in the past, one of the guys that's in charge of the Boston field office of the FBI, Ian stuck a camera in his face, did an ambush interview, and called him a corrupt cop. And
is he?
Anybody who would use their power to convict somebody for something that they, would make an in run around it, they're corrupt. Now, maybe this guy thoroughly believes that selling Bitcoin without a license and then somehow enabling Nigerian princes to rip off little old ladies is a bad and evil thing. In that case, he has done his job and is not corrupt. If in fact he's like, I'm going to get Ian Freeman by any means necessary, then he is corrupt. I don't know which is true, and I wouldn't be able to say. But that guy is still part of the power of the Boston field office of the Federal Bureau of Investigations. So Ian Freeman has to do one of two things, in my opinion. He has to stop doing Free Talk Live, or he has to move out of New Hampshire. And I don't know whether if he chooses to not do either of those things, I believe he's destined for prison. And I think he should move out of the United States entirely. And I'll go ahead and make this statement about Ross Ulbricht. He was a fool if he was running Silk Road and living in San Francisco. Okay? Now, I don't know whether he was still running Silk Road. I don't have I don't have intimate knowledge of this situation, but that's foolish. He should have been someplace else. Yes, the FBI and policing organizations have gone around the world and looked for other people running other things. But these were far more distasteful people than the Dread Pirate Roberts was in what they've done in these kind of things. So either way, you should be outside of the jurisdiction that you are, that hates you most. Do you think
Ross Ulbricht then will stay out of the public eye in soon?
I don't know. I'd love to give him Free Talk Live. Come up here. Hey, come up here, Ross. Be a co-host.
For the same reason that you've just said about your business partner. do you think he'll have thought the same thoughts and will decide? Because he's obviously perfect to be a Bitcoin evangelist.
Oh, sure.
Now, isn't he?
Sure.
You know,
I think he should, in my opinion, he should do the same thing that I recommend to Ian, which is, to either stay out of the public eye or go to a different country.
Right. Free talk live from a free city. That's it then.
Yeah.
You heard it here first.
I've been invited by Eric Brimman.
It's going to be all the greats. The only way you can get on is if you've been in prison. There you go. That's distasteful. We can do distasteful too.
Well, if you're going to make jokes, make them funny.
Right, Mark. Anyway, it's lovely to talk to you, and thanks for coming all that way. I mean, if you add up how far I came as well, then we've done pretty well. And good luck. And I, and this is just an outsider talking, but I think you should do this. I think you should do this. I would. I think this is amazing. I think you don't just let a brand disappear when it's kind of got traction like that. And from my position here, I look at a brand, I look at something like this and think, yeah, I want this. I want this for what I've got. So, and you've got it. And I know it's funny, extraneous circumstances at the moment, but I think this is the age of the battle of ideas. And I think the internet has caused that. I think the internet was invented and now ideas travel across space and time like never before. And I think that's, if you're good at it and you like talking about it and you can convey your ideas well to people, I think it's your duty probably to be on air doing that kind of stuff.
Well, if anybody has any ideas that mirror yours, they can email them to me at mark@freetalklive.com.
All right. We'll do that. We've actually, well, no, I'll tell you off camera what I've been doing here, but it's very interesting. America is really the land of possibilities, isn't it? Anyway, Mark, thanks for coming. Thanks for coming in.
Thanks for coming into my studio.
I thank me for coming into your studio. And and good luck. And it was great talking to you.
It was a real pleasure. Thank you.